Alright, so today our stories take us to very many places. And first, we're going to start with Shoya no Ie. Now, what is Shoya no Ie? Actually, it's very easy. First, Ie in Japanese means house. No means belonging to. Shoya is a little bit more difficult. Shoya were chiefs in the Edo period. This was an electoral position, so the villages were free to choose their own leaders. But most of the time, this was a person who was very, very well off. Actually, their social rank was kind of between social classes. So in the Edo period Japan, the lowest class were merchants, afterwards were craftsmen, then peasants, and then samurai, and then other nobility. But Shoya were kind of in between the peasant and the samurai class. Because of this, they were able to actually go and appeal village issues to the lords. However, they were still peasants and they still lived in the village, and they were still kind of, the subordinate class. Because Shoya were quite well off, usually they had incredibly big homes, as for example is the house behind me, which is Shoya no Ie, or house that belongs to Shoya. Houses like these are called minka, and they were built very, very strong. That's why they are able to stand for 100 or even more years without getting harmed from the elements like snow or earthquakes and stuff like that. Usually several generations would live in the same house, so they were relatively big compared to their counterparts in the cities. So these were actually village homes. However, after World War II, gradually these types of homes, they went out of style. And these days, it's very rare to see more than one or two of them together all in one place. So some characteristics of Edo period houses. The walls that you see right here are actually only the outer walls, and very often another house with inner walls would be built into the house. This was for, heat preservation purposes, as well as anything else. So as you see, the window here is covered by horizontal boards. These boards are to keep the snow from actually crushing into the glass. Now, of course, using shutters would have been more efficient, but because the snow season here is so long, it can be upwards of 6 months, any bit of sunlight and outside light is very, very precious. So yes, the snow does get in a little bit, but the parallel boards were used instead of completely closed off shutters, just to get some light in. If you notice, the icicles are a little bit yellowed. The reason for that is that the roof is covered by thatching, which is essentially straw. You can see the color of the straw in the melted water that forms icicles. So now, please note the roof. You can barely see the roof because right now it's covered under 3 meters of snow. However, even with the snow, you can see that the roof is very, very tall. And in fact, the roof is also very, very steep. As you can see on the left over there, the snow kind of drops off. This is because the roof is so steep to actually have the snow fall off the roof and make piles next to the building. However, as it is here, the snow doesn't always fall off the roof, so it's necessary to actually go up on the roof and clean the snow off yourself. Now, it is still necessary, even these days, to do this. However, over the years, people in this area have perfected the method. So, of course, sometimes if there's not so much snow, the snow can be just pushed off, and these days, this is mostly what is done. However, in the past, they would make blocks out of snow, and these blocks were, in a very orderly fashion, placed in the streets. Yes, in winter, most of the time, the streets were covered in snow as well as the buildings were. And the snow was sometimes as tall as a second story, so people would have to exit and enter their homes through windows. Now, if you could still walk down the streets because a lot of the buildings had covered walkways in front of the entranceway. or you could just walk on the snow on the second floor. So another feature of Edo era houses are these kind of doors. If you see, this door is very small. It slides to open and to close. So, oh, sorry. Okay, close. So there are two reasons for the door this size. One reason is, of course, to keep in the warmth, but another reason, which I heard, was to keep out the thieves. Because when a thief goes into this door and, they got their booty, they're trying to come out, they can't come out of the small door. So that's why well-off houses very, very often had very small doors. And theoretically, the wealthier the house, the smaller the door. Inside, the house would often be divided into two areas. Tatami-covered area and rooms without tatami. The tatami-covered rooms were usually used for guests and also very respected visitors. The rooms are generally light and spacious with different traditional elements. For example, you can see the paper shoji screens that cover the windows in some of the wall alcoves. Here this is kind of a place of honor that is in a traditional Japanese house. We have the kakijiku, which depicts a scenery of mountains and rivers and often just very nature-esque kind of scenes. And also perhaps some heirlooms or just beautiful, aesthetically pleasing things. So these rooms were meant to kind of create the picture of wealth, and often guests would come directly into these rooms through separate entrances. The rooms without tatami were typically used by the family. In summer, the floors were usually left alone and were just wooden. And in winter, they would often be covered with straw mats. Not tatami mats, just regular straw mats that would be thrown out afterwards. Now, these were also the rooms that had irori. Irori is an open hearth that sits in the middle of the floor. Now, as you can see, there's no fire in it right now, but usually the fires would be going in the hearth all year round. This fire was used to heat up the room and also to cook food and just for general fire purposes. Similar to dining tables in the West, families would often eat around irori as well.
とろみってこれなんかつけてるんですか？
片栗粉で。
そうなんですね。この辺では結構普通ですか？
この具材はその地区によって違うとこもあるんですが、はい、ここはこういう感じで。違いますね。
So, as often in Japan, the local diet consisted of rice, pickled or dried vegetables, and meat or fish. Some examples of local dishes are, for example, nope soup. Nope soup is a typical Niigata dish that varies depending on the region, but typically has vegetables, for example, some root vegetables or konjac or some others, chikwa and chicken. This soup is also thickened by potato starch. Another Niigata delicacy is sasadango. Sasadango is a traditional Niigata dessert, which is sweet dumplings with bean paste inside that are wrapped in fragrant bamboo leaves. This keeps the sweets very, very fresh and adds a natural herbal smell to the finished product. And of course, one of the local delicacies are many wild plants that are prepared throughout the year and are pickled or boiled. For example, here are young bamboo shoots that were collected in the spring and are served all year round. So the 4-meter snowfalls really made life difficult for the people of Niigata. They required some creative solutions to store foods because, as you can imagine, the snow would start falling in perhaps October and wouldn't melt until April. So for 6 months at a time, they couldn't gather or grow their own food. Of course, pickling and drying food works very, very well. However, it is very difficult to prepare the necessary amount for the whole year. So, food had to be stored for when, the snow melted, but nothing has grown yet. And some very creative solutions were created. One of them is storing the food directly in the snow. So they would literally take the food and put it into the snow and then pile more snow on top, and the food would be there for a very long time, or for as long as they needed, and until the snow melted, and then it was available until, other sources of food began to grow. However, this was a little bit problematic. One was food would get damaged because, it's just sitting there in the snow. And the second was because if the food was necessary throughout the year, throughout the cold months, it was impossible to get to it because it was under literally meters of snow. So eventually this method evolved. Firstly, they created a small warehouse, or maybe a storage box, I guess it depends on the place, and then they would put the food in the warehouse or the storage box and cover it with snow. Now, access was still very difficult, however, the damage factor was eliminated. And finally, they created a very special solution of split warehouse. So they would build a very big warehouse where half of it was filled with snow and the other half would be filled with supplies. This, of course, solved the damage problem because supplies were, stored safely, and also they were easily accessed throughout the year. And even in the colder months, you could get, some very fresh root vegetables, for example, if you wanted to. So this method is still used today. We're here today at Yuki no Hako, or snow box, or snow storage, snow warehouse, where the split warehouse system is still used. So one half of the warehouse is filled with snow. The snow literally goes to the roof. Of course, these days they don't do this by hand. They usually use snow blowers and other machinery, and perhaps some, shoveling to get the snow in there all the way. And then the other half is filled with goods to be stored. So as you can see, different things are stored in the warehouse today. These are 30 kilogram bags of rice, and there's a lot of them here, as you can see. And also different vegetables, like, for example, carrots and potatoes, not eggs, are also stored here. And my personal favorite is summer sakura. So this is actually really, really interesting. These branches are cut in the spring right before sakura they are about to bloom, and then they're kept in water in these cold temperatures just to kind of make them believe that, spring hasn't come yet. And then for events, for example, last year for the Paralympics that happened in Niigata, these branches are taken out, and in the warm summer air, they bloom and you get sakura in the spring. I think it's a brilliant idea. Why are the snow warehouses still used today? Because this method seems a little bit arcane. Well, there are several reasons. Reason number one, snow provides a very stable temperature of 3 degrees throughout the year. There's no chance of failure. For example, if in a regular warehouse, if the electricity goes out, then, the temperature may change. And actually, in an electrically powered warehouse, the temperature does vary a little bit. In snow storage, no variation, it is always 3 degrees. And reason number two, this temperature of 3 degrees, it adds a very special taste to the food. It makes the vegetables a lot sweeter. It adds a very interesting aftertaste to the sake, and rice is always, always, always fresh. So if your rice and your materials are stored in the snow warehouse, then you can actually say, it was stored in the snow warehouse, you can get it certified, and it's, really good for your brand. And of course, you are guaranteed very fresh, very good quality rice, vegetables, sake, and whatever else you want to put in there. This is a store right next to the snow box, and here you can purchase different vegetables and rice and other things that were stored in the snow box for 6 months or sometimes a year. So this, for example, is rice, Hakasake rice, which is from Joetsu City, which is where we are, Niigata Prefecture. So these are vegetables that are aged in the snow box. As you see, there is some garlic, and I think the most recognizable here is carrots. I do apologize, I don't know the name of the other vegetables in English, but you can also see that they have mushrooms as well that were aged in the snow box, and of course different type of lettuce. We're gonna say this is lettuce. There's also some potatoes as well. This is sake that was also stored in the snow box for some time. I think it depends on the type of sake and how long it was in there, but they say that the taste of the sake is very unique and it changes and becomes a lot sweeter and milder and a lot more delicious. So if you ever have a chance, please try it out. Also, very cute. You can see the, because the kind of, this is a sake bottle, and it's in the shape of a snowman because, you know, snow. And of course, except for sake and vegetables and rice, also coffee and different types of tea are aged in the snow room. And you can see over here it says, you know, snow room. And this makes the teas and the coffee, the taste a lot stronger and a lot more, you know, a lot better and fresher, more refreshing. Being buried under meters of snow for most of the year also allowed for interesting traditions, crafts, and cultures to develop. Japanese traditional snowshoes, or kanjiki, are made of straw and branches. Straw-woven ropes are used to secure the kanjiki to the shoes. So, as you see, walking in the snow can be quite an interesting affair. Well, actually, very, very difficult. So, oh God. I am wearing snowshoes, but even in snowshoes, I'm still going almost knee deep. But it's also really fun, and it's great. And you can see the very tall trees. These are sugi trees. They are evergreens, but they're very unusual evergreens. I don't think I've actually seen them outside of Japan. So many people who live in Japan, they actually develop allergies to these trees, which are terrible. But they don't start until middle of February, so I'm still safe. Okay, let's go. Oh. Traditional crafts are also practiced today in this area. Among others, thin and flexible reeds or branches are used to make sturdy baskets. I'm supposed to turn it. Ah. There you go. Okay, so I need to make it tighter. Pull it tighter. This is back. Yes.
ここへ入れてください。そうすると分かんないでしょ。同じくなりましたでしょ。よかった。はい。
And what is a better way to warm up than by playing music and dancing? Traditional taiko drumming is practiced by many locals even today.